I think it's nice if we understand why AI make these predictions, but in a lot of cases, it's not always possible.
So anything we do to open that up, whether it's explainable AI or some of the initiatives you're talking about, Ash, they'll go a long way in making these solutions more adoptable.
Actionable AI becomes the theme there. How can I make a decision and take action on it? And most often it's real time.
Given how many information sharing scandals there have been year after year after year. And so whether you do or not, that trust issue, which has been brought up already, I think is a really big issue to get at.
The cloud is great. It solves a lot of real-world problems, but it's not just one cloud anymore. Public clouds, private clouds, edge clouds. The average business uses 5 different cloud providers. It's become chaotic and complex, with unpredictable costs, inconsistent security, multiple management tools, and different formats for workloads that span cloud platforms and providers. But it doesn't have to be that way. The Dell Technologies Cloud, powered by VMware, can be the one constant across your clouds. It brings consistent infrastructure and operations to your multi-cloud environment, so you can choose the right cloud for each application. A public cloud that lets you easily tap into services, a private cloud that's fully under your control, or the edge with cloud as a service. With a true hybrid cloud experience, your business becomes more agile with simple workload migration and easy onboarding for new assets. Your teams get to market faster. With simplified operations and automated processes, you reduce risk and strengthen your security profile. And with Dell Technologies Cloud, you have flexible consumption options, reducing your total cost of ownership. Like it or not, the business world often requires many clouds. Now, that's easier than ever, with consistent infrastructure, operations, and services across all your clouds. You get the cloud without the chaos. The Dell Technologies Cloud.
All right. Good morning, good evening, folks. Welcome to the cybersecurity track at TICON 2020. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here for this track. Definitely we live in interesting times, don't we? We had a wonderful set of panels last year in person in Santa Clara, but this year, thanks to the phenomenal COVID pandemic, we have to do this virtually. The good news is, so many more of you are able to join this from all across the lovely planet that we live in. And I hope sooner or later we'll be past, we'll forget all about COVID and we'll talk about, remember those days. So anyway, so glad that so many of you can join us today. We have a world-class track on security today with 3 panels that comprises of, truly world-class experts on cybersecurity, who will be covering a lot of topics today. The first panel is going to be AI and security and data privacy, moderated by Ash Ahuja. Then the second is a keynote by Haiyan Song, moderated by Nat. And finally, we have a panel on a very interesting area that is relevant today is DevSecOps, moderated by Abhi Dugar. And my name is Girish Mukai, and I'm a co-chair of this along with Nat and a whole bunch of others, part of this team that we have been not only happy but privileged to put this together. So we all know enterprises all across the world have been obsessed with cybersecurity over the years, and more money has been deployed to keep the enterprise infrastructure safe and keep the bad guys out. We've been doing that throughout. However, thanks to the ubiquitous access, we have all of us now live with multiple devices. We want access from everywhere, and applications are constantly moving to the cloud, and the workloads, any transactions we do, they crisscross all kinds of applications thanks to the abundance of API mechanisms today. So the traditional perimeter security is of absolutely no use anymore. In fact, there is no perimeter anymore at this point. So new approaches, which are far more sophisticated, have definitely been developed over the years, thanks to technology development and the brain trust of the cybersecurity community that we have at large here. Of course, things like zero trust, multi-factor authentication are all examples of that aspect, right? And also the security and business leaders are facing the need to change the way they approach cybersecurity and risk. Corporate boards are now asking for improved data and better understanding of what they have achieved after years of major investments in security postures, right? It's no longer, hey, I want to spend this money, I want to keep it safe, but they want to see what is the real impact, what else do we need to do? And then the COVID thing has only accelerated the need for a phenomenally different posture at this point. So our esteemed group of panelists, they'll address a number of aspects of cybersecurity today. So Lord and Store. So please welcome Naveen Bisht, who's a partner in crime for us in pulling this track together. And he's a co-founder and CEO of Akitra, to introduce his panel. So Naveen, over to you. Naveen?
Yes. Thank you, Greece. Appreciate it very much. As Greece mentioned, I've been also in the cybersecurity and networking infrastructure for a long time, and been involved with TI and TiCon for a number of years as a board member, volunteer, and also helping Greece and Nat as the co-chair here, as well as in Entrepreneur Track tomorrow. In any case, I would like to, for this first panel, AI in security and data privacy, we have a group of amazing experts from the industry, right from startups to VCs as well as large companies. And we have, starting with Chengxi Wang in our panel. She's the founder and general partner of Rain Capital, a cybersecurity fund for the early stage investments. Then we have Dr. Andrea Limbago, who's an expert in the data privacy and the geopolitics of cybersecurity. And she's vice president of research and analysis at Enteros. And Gordon Smith, he's a successful veteran of a number of successful startups, including he and I had co-founded our first firewall security company in the late 90s. And right now he's chief marketing officer for Akitra. Then we have Krishna, who is an expert in the security networking area and used to be distinguished engineer at Juniper, as well as he was founder of Top Layer Networks. And currently he's founder and chief scientist at Netscope, which is a leader in cloud security. And then we have Vinay Anand, who's also an expert and industry veteran with currently he's director of product management for the hybrid cloud security at Google. And earlier in his career, he was a vice president of product at IBM, Aruba, McAfee, and a host of other companies. So with that, and Ash brings a very strong background from the industry. He's been with Gartner for 11 years as a CISO in residence and vice president for the security and privacy and governance. And one of the interesting tidbits about Ash is he started coding at the age of 13. I think a lot of kids do here in Silicon Valley. But the fact he started his first company at the age of 15 and developed a number of products. Anyway, with that, I would like to invite Ash to take over this exciting group of panelists. And
I've always chosen to surround myself by great people who are very forward-thinking when it comes to gender issues and diversity. I think diversity is a key and central element of any environment, and I've never been in an environment where diversity doesn't lead to a better place. From a science perspective, we know that if you have greater diversity of microbes, for example, in your gut, that you're more likely to be healthy. And that's finding of diversity of microbes in your gut. If you think about the diversity of people in a working environment, it leads to a healthier environment and more innovation.
Thanks, Naveen. Good to be here and looking forward to a really good discussion. If all the panelists can turn on their videos and unmute themselves, that'd be great. So this morning we wanted to talk about AI and security, a couple of areas. So we're going to break up this panel in three parts. We'll start with some of the problems that AI and machine learning actually cause that wants us to have better security and privacy controls. The second part will focus more on the security technology and the enterprise sector on what are we not doing and what else can AI and machine learning really help do. And the third part is going to be more on the consumer side. As a consumer, is privacy a foregone conclusion? Can you actually expect privacy with technologies like AI, making sense out of all kinds of bits and pieces of information all over the place? So that's the structure. So let's start with the first part, and Naveen did a quick intro for the panelists, so I won't waste time going there. Let's dive deep into the discussion. So the first part I want to talk about when it comes to AI is around the whole concept of metadata, right? Anytime someone is pulled up in front of the Congress and they have to testify, a lot of the companies here in Silicon Valley, they say, oh, well, we don't store any information. All we store is the metadata. So it's all fine. And there is a metadata myth that's going about within the industry. So I would like to ask the panelists, maybe start with you, Andrea, on how do you think about this metadata problem? What is the metadata myth according to you, and why is this something we all should be concerned about?
Hi, thanks, and just thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be part of this panel and to learn from the others on the panel as well. And so when it comes to the metadata myth, if you think about it, technology obviously has outpaced the law and legal system. That's not something that's terribly shocking, I think, to anyone. And so it's basically what metadata was the legal distinction between accessing the contents of communications versus harvesting only the communications metadata. And so there's that legal distinction between one is allowed and one is not, with a thought that if you're getting the communications and actual content of that, such as like the body of an email, then that's where the privacy problem and infringements would be, versus the metadata where ostensibly you wouldn't be able to figure out who the person was or what they were doing or who they were communicating with. And or more so, actually, even so you can figure out the communications, but not necessarily get into dive into the content of the data. And so with that distinction, the legal distinction, that remains sort of a bedrock for explaining why it's okay to collect the metadata, but not anything else. And as we've seen over and over and over again, actually are enormous privacy infringements, especially as automation, machine learning, and just the vast amounts of data over the last few decades have come into play. Basically the assumptions that were behind the metadata, the legalization, the legal distinctions on that, the assumptions behind that no longer are relevant. And we could get into a long discussion whether they were relevant even in the beginning, but I think that's a separate discussion. But as it is now, there for sure are ways to cross-correlate based on metadata and identify who people are. I think one of the best, more accessible discussions on that, the New York Times did a really great analysis on that, on some of the metadata and how they're able to locate people without really any of their own actual with just by using some of the metadata and some of the geolocation data. And so that's starting to come into the public. There's some interesting research being done on that that's actually getting into the popular press now. And so that kind of sums it up for where it stands and why that matters.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think, and that is a myth right now, because you come across most people, right? They think, oh yeah, I don't care about the fact that this company X is going to store my calls or my emails. I don't have anything to lose. But the problem is that metadata is really where the big money is for them, right? That's what they can use to target, build your own fingerprint as an individual and target you for whatever they need to do. So that also brings this other part that has become, a big buzzword is around explainable AI. And that's something that's also trying to get around this problem. So help us understand, and I'll let anyone in the panel who wants to take this one, go for it, is, what is explainable AI and what's the challenge today? Because it's an approach to try and make sense out of these black box AI systems. And there are certain problems that are not solvable. And anyone on the panel would like to talk about explainable AI if you're doing work in that space, and what that means and what the problem is?
Yeah, I can take that first. So the AI systems are typically you input data and it has an algorithm or set of algorithms trying to make sense of the data and then output analysis results, right? So a very simple example is you cluster data and tell you, okay, this cluster it has certain characteristics and other clusters may have other characteristics. However, the characteristics that the AI algorithm output may not be intuitive or may not be something that a human can understand. So I remember when I was at McAfee, we did a customer success study and we had lots of data about customers and we did a clustering algorithm, and there's a specific population that has more, sort of business tendency to do certain things. And we said, okay, what's common about that set of population? Turns out we could not get any consistent theme across that population of customers that human can understand. However, the data algorithm pointed to them as a cluster. Now, because it's an algorithm that we wanted to use for the website, it worked. It worked like a charm, right? So, and in the end, we said, okay, even when we didn't understand why these people have commonality, they clearly do in the context of the system. So in that sense, we didn't have explainable AI, but we had effective AI algorithms. So I think it's nice if we understand why AI make these predictions, but in a lot of cases, it's not always possible. And we should not discount the business benefits of data analysis.
Got it. No, thank you.
As the world reopens, ServiceNow is helping customers make sure going back to the workplace works for everyone. Introducing the Safe Workplace apps and dashboard. 4 apps specifically designed to help ensure the health and safety of your workforce and workplace, all housed in a single dashboard to give you a comprehensive look into everything you need to know. And they're available now, out of the box, powered by the Now platform. Get a bird's eye view to make sure your employees are prepared and ready to go back to the workplace. Manage inventory levels across your organisation thanks to workflows that automatically replenish supplies. Screen and verify the health of your employees and help manage workflows for cleaning, sanitation and safe distancing for employees. 4 essential apps, 1 comprehensive dashboard. Together we can make sure going back to the workplace can work for everyone. That's the power of the Now platform.
So I'm guessing this is a big part of where there are opportunities, right? We can talk about it from a Silicon Valley perspective as well, on what are the things that are being done in, as far as explainable AI is concerned, and how do you need to make that more impactful? And of course, there are lots of experts here, but from a challenge perspective, is this more? Do you see, and whoever has a more compliance and a regulatory background can chime in, is explainable AI, does it actually have opportunities from a Silicon Valley product entrepreneur mindset, or is it more of a regulation problem, do you think? What is going to actually make more of these AI systems be explainable and actually be doing the right thing as compared to, monetizing user information and infringing on privacy? Whoever wants to take that question.
Well, I'd like to chime in on that, not necessarily from a regulatory standpoint, but it's just in the nature of AI that some kinds of algorithms are going to produce outputs that are more explainable than others. Bayesian kinds of algorithms, decision tree algorithms are more explainable, whereas deep learning is not. And you can't necessarily favor one algorithm over the other purely on that basis, because some algorithms are better for attacking some kinds of problems as opposed to others. So in the field of security, which my company deals with, One important factor is the extent to which the results of the output of our system are believable on the part of security analysts. Security analysts are inherently skeptical people. They want to know how you determined that a given threat was really a threat, and it's simply not always possible to explain, for example, for a problem that was uncovered by deep learning, how the algorithm came to that conclusion. So, you know, it's a fundamental dilemma that you are stuck with, and ultimately the credibility of the output is going to depend on the quality of the results. The methodology itself may never be fully explicable to the consumer of that information.
Got it. Excellent.
And can I chime in a little bit on the regulation side? Just, you know, in the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, there is a component for the right to explanation, and so there is a, you know, I'm a firm believer that we need both tech and policy, and I think policies lag behind, but you know, that's actually starting to shift a little bit. GDPR is one of the first ones to come in and try and provide some parameters in there for requiring some level of explanation. And so I think, you know, it might be a little bit of a push and pull, and for, you know, in each way with the tech making some advances on that. And yeah, absolutely, you know, some of the algorithms may not be as amenable to explanation, but maybe that's where we get the tech to move along and think about, you know, for the consumers and for when we do need to have it to be explainable. You know, that might be go into the decision making for what tech is used, what algorithms get used, depending on what the product is and who their users are. But the regulations are coming at least from the EU, and you know, the US. There's been plenty of discussion along those lines as well.
Really good point, Andrea.
Yeah,
and I also see, like, just this week, there's Data Ethics, which is the Danish think tank. They've launched their trustworthy AI self-assessment checklist, which I think is the first time I've seen something that well-defined being launched, and I would love to hear from you, you guys, on what you think about it, and also from Vinay and Chensi. I think you had something you wanted to add there. I want to hear more from, you know, as an investor, as a VC, when you're looking at people that are trying to solve these problems. How do you go after that, and what do you look at, and how do you evaluate that? Because part of and I've done a lot of discussions with VCs and CISOs in Silicon Valley. And I hate to say this, but I think a big part of the problem that we are facing today is because VCs are not paying attention to some of these problems that are being created in some of the companies that are being funded. Unless you're a VC that's focused on security or privacy companies, then you are aware of it. But if you're not, you don't care about these issues as much, is my experience so far. So both Chensi and Vinay, I would love to hear from you on trustworthy AI.
Yeah, so let me extend what Gordon said, and I'll take a security angle to it. I've been building security products for almost all my life. And even before the advent of AI, right, as we know it today, even 10, 15, 20 years ago, when we just did correlation, which was nothing to do with deep learning or any of these things, there was a lot of distrust from our customers to enforce anything that the machine generated automatically. Even when we showed them how we came to the conclusion, right? Because it was a machine-generated output. And I'll take a brief example of deep packet inspection. This technology has been around forever. We built intrusion prevention systems. Most of our customers would deploy them in alert mode and not in enforcement mode. Even though we would show which signature matched and, you know, which regex expression matched, it was very crystal clear. So extend that mistrust to today, where systems are very opaque, and there's a lot of data and, you know, machine generated algorithms, and we collect data from different locations and sources. And there's a lot of mistrust. So anything we do to open that up, whether it's explainable AI or some of the initiatives you're talking about, Ash, they'll go a long way in making these solutions more adoptable. And making them more enforceable, as against just pretty dashboards where people see alerts and do nothing. And we all know, right, starting from the Equifax fiasco all the way Target and so many others, where the systems had identified the intruder, but nobody took action because that was one of 10,000 alerts that showed up, and no one wanted to trust a machine telling them that there is a problem here. So the more we do to decipher that and offer our users trust in the system, I think we go a long way.
Oh, good point, Vinay.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. There are a lot of things we do with algorithms today have social impact, right? And explainable AI can help us manage that social impact. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine whose daughter is going on a trip to West Africa to dispense COVID-related aid, right? And they have a huge territory to cover. And but they have limited resources. And the way they decide who is going to get aid is by an algorithm. The algorithm actually decides who is poor enough in that region of the world to receive aid. Now, in this case, it really has huge social impact, whether the algorithm is making the right decision, right? So I think there's a lot of things we can do to increase transparency of the algorithm, to test whether the algorithm is making the right decisions. So as an investor, I've looked at lots of different approach. And today, I think there's an interesting conflict between privacy and explainable AI, right? So for instance, there's a very popular technique called differential privacy, which basically says it enables you to do aggregated data analysis without leaking information on specific data elements or data patterns, if you will. However, explainable AI in some ways want you to explain some of the data patterns within the data sets you're executing the algorithm on. So where do you draw the line is a very interesting, not only technical problem, but also a social problem that all of us should be aware of and thinking about it. So I looked at a fuzzing AI solution, right? So basically you treat the AI algorithm as a black box, but you inject specific data into the data sets to see if you can perturb the results of the analysis. And based on what data you inject, you kind of get the edge of the algorithm. You understand where the cluster lives and which one's the outlier. Hence, it leaks information by doing these tests. So how much we do as a test and how much information we can draw from it, what's the implication on privacy, it's a very, very interesting problem.
Right. Interesting
I just
world.
want to chime in a little bit. This is Krishna here.
Yes,
to what,
Krishna. I was about to pull you in because I want to hear from you.
Yeah, what Gordon and Vinay said, right? So from my experience, right, when it comes to security, there is real-time security. I think that's what Vinay was talking about, like deep packet inspection and so on, where I think actionable AI becomes the theme there. How can I make a decision and take action on it? And most often it's real time, right? You cannot wait. So that's a challenge. And what we are finding is there are certain problems when it comes to data protection, where you can use like deep learning to get some actionable information in a very short amount of time to protect like data exfiltration in other cases. But yeah, I would say like from a security, from my experience, it's been more actionable AI that has been the theme.
Right. No, good point. And I think RSA last year also had I think one of their startups that won their I forget what they call the competition of the startups, right? The new companies was a company that was trying to use AI and machine learning for addressing the privacy issue, right? Trying to really figure out and solve the privacy problem by using AI and machine learning. So I think actionable intelligence on something that you can do, like you said, Krishna, I think makes a lot of sense. What other areas from a security perspective, security and a privacy perspective, and focus more on privacy? Because I think security, we all understand AI and machine learning has a lot of good that it brings to the table for correlating, you know, these terabytes and terabytes of troves of logs and what's happening in events. Talk about privacy a little bit, both all of you that have been in the security industry. Where are the opportunities that are still completely open, where we don't have enough solutions, where these technologies can be put to good use, but it's an area that is a big gap right now? Either from a VC perspective or even from Vinay, your perspective, or anybody on the panel who feels passionate about this, please speak up.
I think as countries start enforcing more and more privacy regulations, GDPR was the first, and now we are seeing CCPA. And I have a list of about more than 50 countries which are in different stages of coming up with their own data privacy and data residency laws. This opens up a huge opportunity from a technology and a startup perspective. The kind of solutions you need today to address each of these requirements, and there are some common themes there, right? Allowing the user to understand what data is stored and giving them the option to delete it, et cetera, et cetera. CCPA has done a good job laying it out in a very easy to understand manner, and a lot of others are copying that. I was in Brazil recently, and they are essentially taking GDPR, and they even told us, they said, look, we are taking the GDPR spec and just changing keywords. So if you comply with GDPR, 99.9% will comply with what we are going to come out with eventually, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity for two reasons. One is to allow businesses to comply with these laws, because the penalty is pretty stiff. As volume goes up, as number of instances of abuse goes up, penalty goes up. So that is one. And the second, from a consumer point of view, let's say I go to a e-commerce portal. If they make it easy for me to understand which parts of my data are being used and stored and what happens to it, I might go there against going to a different portal, which is their competition. So there are two sides to this that I think is prime for a lot of startup innovation here.
So what you're saying is that only regulation, right? All these different regulations that are coming out, they are going to push people, and that's going to create opportunity. I like the last part that you said, Vinay, where you're saying, you can be a value proposition if you actually show what you do with customer data, and you go to one portal versus the other. So are there similar opportunities that are not being pushed by regulation that will help make AI systems and machine learning systems better by design to begin with? Are there opportunities there that anybody feels are still untapped or need to be explored more?
I can chime in there. So one of the things that we are finding, and again, I wouldn't say it's a solved problem, right? A big issue in enterprise customers that we deal with is insider threat, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where I feel there's a lot of potential. The better the data that you can gather, you talked about metadata initially, so the better metadata that you can gather and then deploy some of these algorithms with deep learning and AI and so on, gives better insights, right? There's always easy ways to exfiltrate data. If you look at deterministic ways, we have had DLP systems and others for a long time. Right. Easy exfiltration of data. And the only way I think is to stop these unknowns is to apply techniques using AI and ML to look at user activity and to profile users and detect these insider threats. So I think that's a big area. I know there are a lot of products out there, but I still feel it's ripe for more innovation.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I feel that, I feel that the applying AI and ML for security problems and applying AI and ML for customer data analysis are two different arenas. The requirements are different, the implications are different. For instance, people tend not to be bothered by giving you attacker data, right? So you can go at it, but to give you customer data, to trust that you're a good steward of customer data is a whole new ballgame. So the requirements are different and the assurance levels different. And CCPA and GDPR is really all about customer data. Now, if we take that angle, right, so there are really interesting opportunities for innovation. For instance, if you want to do more on analyzing customer behavior, you need more data. But the regulations are telling you having more data is complex. You're going to have to do more things. So the new technical abilities coming out of the research community, which is, some of it are full homomorphic encryption, for instance, FHE, are really interesting. It allows you to do operation on encrypted data, and also allows you to do operation on data that's not moved and not putting into a different data store.
Right.
And I'm looking at some of those directions. I think making it more usable, more performance oriented will go a long ways for us to not only abide by privacy regulations, but also give us the ability to analyze data more and collect more data.
That's a big part that I think VCs can play on both sides of the demand and supply, right? You find a lot of companies that use AI and customer data for doing things that maybe not the best, but then you find a whole bunch of security and privacy companies that go fix the problem using AI and machine learning. It's a nice loop.
Hey, Ash, you should be a VC.
Excellent. So from an enterprise sector, let's just stay in that space a little bit more. And Gordon, you might also be able to enlighten us a little bit on this front, because what I am noticing now, especially like with COVID and other accelerants, right, from a disruption standpoint, more and more companies are trying to do what larger companies in Silicon Valley have done with data and trying to monetize it. They're trying to get better understanding of their customers, their product lines, their sales patterns, their e-commerce versus retail versus, what do we do? How do we stay alive? But I feel a lot of them are going to be making the same mistakes that some of these larger companies have made and have learned and have been, a lot of these regulations like GDPR, we know why they came out to begin with, right? What drove them to say we need more regulation here? So I think the larger companies now have enough people that are focusing on, how do we abide by these 40+ regulations? What do we do as far as trying to, clean up our act somewhat? But I feel most of these companies, especially the projects being led by marketing and sales and, customer analytics and customer CRM, all of those, they are going to be running it like the Wild West without realizing what the implications are of the data that they're collecting, kind of things that they're doing in the enterprise sector. So any perspectives there that either you have, Gordon, or Andrea, you have on what should they be thinking of besides something like this trustworthy AI self-assessment that came out this week?
Well, in enterprise security, of course, the privacy issues are wildly different. And enterprise security is, the perspective that I bring from Akitra. There is the assumption that there is no anonymity. There is precious little privacy. That's part of the implicit or even explicit deal there. Things are being made much more complicated by the fact that now with employees working from home on a mass basis, and of course they're using their own devices, their own laptops, their own cell phones, etc. So you really have broken down the wall between what an employee is doing with company assets on company time and what they are doing with their own assets on their own time. So this is a very interesting area of privacy that is intruding into the world of corporate security for the first time, and it's hard to know what exactly the
and that's why I'm bringing it up.
Barrier is there.
Yeah, and that's why I bring it up, Gordon, because I feel all this focus on privacy has been on the consumer side, but all of this craziness is going on in the corporate world, and nobody cares. None of this data is private, and especially if you look at companies like Krishna's company or other Gatsby's or other cloud security companies that these, even take Microsoft for that matter, right? The amount of fingerprinting you can do of people, who they are, what they're doing, what kind of connections they have, what you could monetize and make use of. The data in the enterprise sector is far more targetable, manageable, but nobody is really looking at that space. Everybody's focused on the consumer side of GDPR. Each of these companies is trying to do their little bit, but the metadata that's being put together by companies that are in the cloud is pretty dangerous. And I don't know what is being done, if anything, in that space. And I'd love to hear from Krishna and Vinay on that front.
Sure. I mean, so I think so currently, you're absolutely right, especially with the remote working, right? More and more of users are directly accessing applications in the cloud. And so a solution like what we built, where it's a cloud platform, is the right place to get the metadata, so to speak, right? So currently the focus has been mostly around like detecting insider threats, protecting intellectual property and regulatory data from being exposed, right? But overall, yes, there is a lot of data that's being collected that could be put to other use as well. And customers have asked us about that, right? For example, how do we compare to peers in our industry? Like, let's take financial services, or let's take like oil and gas and so on, right? And those are some of the areas we are looking to tap into, but you're absolutely right. There's a lot of other uses for the data that's collected other than just pure security, right? But initial focus has been purely on securing the enterprise assets.
Right. The better you are in zero trust is only because you have so much data about this person, right? So you know where they're coming from, what they're doing. So it's like the whole buzzword in our industry, trying to go more and more towards zero trust, means you have more and more data and you know more and more about what this person is doing, which is completely the opposite of what we're trying to solve on the consumer side. So I don't know how this is going to get solved. Vinay, you were.
Yeah, I mean, I've been building zero trust systems since before they were called zero trust. Yes, more data helps us become more secure, no doubt about it. And more context, or in your words, metadata, all that helps. And we collect as much as we can so we can be more actionable. I don't see this as a problem unless these companies, the Netscopes of the world or Googles of the world or whoever, take this employee data or their customer data that's collected in a security context from enterprises and misuse it for marketing purposes, which is not happening today. So that data is very self-contained, and every company I've been with, I can only speak to that. We've been so careful in anonymizing it and creating barriers so that data doesn't leak out. I mean, some of the companies I work with, including my current company, I can't even access the data. And majority of the employees cannot access the data, right? It's sitting in some black box and we only see an anonymous version of it. The IP addresses are blacked out, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't see this as a huge problem unless these corporations, these security companies start misbehaving and cross that line they should not. And till today, they've been very good about it. I can vouch for the companies I work for. And I don't think this is an industry problem today. We need that data. Otherwise, you can't provide security the way customers expect us to provide.
So here's another thing that I always think about, right? All of this, all these moral codes that we live by in Silicon Valley are I don't think they're being followed the same way with some of the companies internationally, I would say, right? If you're a TikTok or if you're a WeChat or a WePay or an Alibaba, you think they have the same exact ethics and morals. So is that something we can rely on for saying,
yeah, no, I want to chime a little bit, because I do think that not all companies adhere by the protect data by all means possible. And I think that I think that's great, and that it's great that many of the standard companies do. There also is a perception that not all companies do. And so there's the perception as a reality as well, given how many information sharing scandals there have been year after year after year. And so whether you do or not, that trust issue, which has been brought up already, I think is a really big issue to get at. But I agree. I mean, the way we're looking at and why we're talking about is very centric on the US. And if you look at the big tech giants that are popping up across the globe, they have very different approaches to it. But I do think having that data protection and having that focus on the data protection, wherever it is, as it moves through the clouds and so forth, across untrusted environments, that can again be an area for competitive advantage for U.S. and other democratic companies based in democracies to leverage those kind of data protection mindsets and ethics, and to still also, while we think we may have come to a certain point and that we're doing well enough, we know that we can still keep doing better on those areas. And given how many clouds are misconfigured and data leaks out, I think that I feel like that pops up every day, that there's some new announcement of some data leakage. It's not even an attack, It's just data leaking out. That highlights that that's not a solved problem as far as data being fully protected, end to end, wherever it goes. And so I think that we need to look at it from that global perspective and continue to try and make it do better and include that human element into it, because so often it is like what was talked about before, the alerts are all there, but no one's reading them. And so if something can be circumvented, people will figure out a way to do so, until they figure out it's in their own advantage. And so I think there's a lot of work still to be done there.
Yeah, so I'm getting a time check warning from the team here. So what I'm hearing is it is the wild west. This is almost like the beginnings of using this technology to do good, and there's also a lot of good and a lot of bad, lots of opportunities. So thank you to all the panelists, and I'll hand it over to Girish, who needs to wrap up the session. Thanks, Girish. Or Karthik, I think.
So thank you so much. That was a wonderful panel. I learned so much about the metadata myth, about explainable AI, about trustworthiness of these algorithms and computing internal actionable AI, and tying it all back to entrepreneurship, which is so important. Thank you, Ash, for moderating the panel Cheng-Shi Wang, Dr. Andrea Lumbago, Gordon Smith, Krishna Narayanaswamy, and Vijay Anand. Thanks for bringing your unique perspectives and years of experience in this field to all of us in the audience. When we envisioned this panel, AI in security and data privacy, back in January, we were living in a different world. Unfortunately, that's not the world we are living in today. So much of our interactions in life is online now. But one thing that has not changed since January is the amount of data that as a society we're collecting and processing. So the panel and the discussion here is extremely important. I'm very bullish, like everyone on the panel, about the power of AI in solving some of the tough cybersecurity related problems, but it always comes with an asterisk, right? That asterisk is security of data that is being collected and privacy of the individuals on whom the data is collected. Panel, thank you so much for highlighting these risks and bringing up these important issues. This is very much going to be an ongoing conversation. I guess we're going to take a small 1-minute break, and then we are on to the keynote. Please stay tuned.
Yeah, Karthik, we're gonna since we started a few minutes late, we're gonna jump right onto the keynote.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks everyone. Appreciate this.
Thanks.